people are joining. We're super, super excited to see all the planners who are interested in Felt. Just as a reminder, I wanted to make sure that we are all collecting our questions for Nick as he will go with the presentation on this map. Here you can paste your questions. And also, if you want to explore some resources and customer stories about Felt, about Felt for planning, you can also click through our map gallery and our case studies. And with that, I am really, really excited to introduce Nick Wright, who is a Scottish planner, and he has an amazing case study for us to share, and he will highlight tips and tricks that help him when he's using Felt in his work. Nick.
Hi, thanks, Anna. Thanks to everyone for coming along today. It's good to see so many people. Some are from Scotland. There's some faces I know, but there's others who I've never met before, probably from all different parts of the world. I'm a geographer, first of all. That's how I trained. And I like maps, which is why I like Felt. But I earn my income as a planner, which I've always thought of as applied geography, really, anyway. And I'm self-employed. I'm freelance. So the kind of work I do is producing village plans, town centre plans, neighbourhood plans, that kind of thing. More and more, it's for community groups themselves, as well as for the public sector, because the Scottish planning system has just introduced something called local place plans, which it's a bit of jargon, so don't worry about that. But they're basically community-led plans that communities produce themselves, and they feed into local authorities' statutory zoning, the statutory land use plans. So some of you who work in Scotland will know about this already, but obviously I'm sure not everyone does. So these local place plans, they're called, are produced with lots of community engagement. And a lot of the work I do is helping community groups to produce those plans over a period of about 6 months or so usually. And typically there'll be a community survey at the start to find out what people value about their area and what could be better. And then we'll work to establish what their priorities are for the future, and we'll turn that into a plan for the future. So that's what I do, and I'll explain a bit about how Felt has kind of really made my life much easier, and started lots of things I couldn't do before. Lots of my work is in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. So typically it gets into issues like a lack of affordable housing for people because of a lack of supply of houses generally, more Airbnb, more second homes being bought up, house prices going up. So the consequences that working families, young people increasingly can't afford to live in these areas. There's also usually poor public transport, means it's hard to get around without a car and it's expensive. Again, that makes it difficult for young people and working people. Lots of people are interested in wanting to live more sustainable lifestyles because of climate change. There's always big things around making it safer to walk and cycle around local areas. There's often poor access to public services, especially health services like doctors and care homes and that sort of thing. Fragile economies, jobs. So those are typically the issues which communities will raise and want to tackle in their plans. And some of the solutions to those things can be mapped. So, for example, the locations of new houses or where they should be built, or natural areas to protect that people value, can map those things. Some of those things, some things we can't map, or some of the solutions we can't map, like for housing, it might be around changing taxation to reduce second home ownership, or making it easier for communities to access money to build their own houses, or changing how health services are delivered. So those things are harder to map. So usually a plan that I'm producing with the community will have some things that can go onto a map and some text or some stuff that can't go onto a map very easily. So it's a combination of both things. But they have to have maps. That's a legal requirement, these plans. But also, I've heard from people who I work with that it's really helpful for people in local communities to help them visualize change if they have a map, something visual, so they can see, that's how my community might look in the future if these things happen. So that's where the maps are really valuable as well. In the past, I used to work with a colleague who had ArcGIS, Esri, so he would produce all the mapping that we did. Often I would write things on bits of paper or do rough maps on Google My Maps and send them to him, but it was very clunky and it wasn't very good for collaboration. It was very one way, and also I couldn't look at layers on GIS and sort of look at the data and the analysis, which I always wanted to do. So for a couple of years, I've been trying to think about ways of resolving that. I've looked at ArcGIS licenses, but they're expensive and I need to invest in training and time to do that. And I'm busy, so that's difficult. And the fees with plans are relatively low as well. But from what I've heard here in the UK, even if you work in government, then the costs of GIS licenses means not everyone can have one on their fingertips on their own computer as well. So I didn't go down that line. I've looked at QGIS a couple of times, and the last 2 summers, I've tried to start training myself in it, but each time I've run out of time before I've really got used to it. For me, it's too complicated and not very intuitive. So I've kind of run out of steam each time I've tried before. Although I'm interested to test out the new QGIS plugin, which Anna was talking about. But then about 6 months ago, I stumbled across Felt. And so I'll show you some of the things I've been doing. But before I do, I should say I'm a pretty basic user of Felt. I barely scratched the surface of what it can do. I don't know anything about APIs, for example. I don't have a clue about that. But in a way, that's the point. I'm a planner. I'm not a digital mapping expert, and that's why Felt's so valuable to me. And I should say I'm not being paid to say any of this. So what I'm going to talk about, I've got really 5 ways that I use Felt. First of all, for analysis, then producing what I call static maps. I'll explain that. And those are the 2 main things I want to talk about. And then a little bit about public commenting, a little bit about collaboration, so working in teams on maps, and then finally, very quickly, a bit about inspiration. So I'll focus on the first 2 things, on analysis and on static maps. My hunch is that lots of you watching this will be doing more advanced stuff than I do, or using Felt in different ways, and that's great. My message really is, if I can do this, then so can you as well. And in the second part of the webinar, I'm very keen that you share your thoughts and ideas about how you could use Felt or do already, because I'm sure I could do things better and quicker as well. So onto these 5 things. So the first one is about analysis of data. And I suspect, like lots of countries, the government in the UK has gradually been putting more and more spatial data online over the last few years. Things like policy designations or flooding information or infrastructure location, all that sort of stuff. But I never had a way of being able to access that data directly on my computer before. So I could never bring the power of all that data and the evidence that it represents to making good plans. I could never tap into that power properly. I'm going to share my screen just to give you a flavor of the kind of data sets which I now realize are available and which I can access through Felt. So hopefully you can now see my screen. There it is. So the Scottish Government has a thing called the Improvement Service. You can see that's just a sample of some of the data sets. So there's now 324 data sets from local and national government on there. And then there's other sources as well, like an organisation called Nature Scot, which is the Natural Environment Agency in Scotland, has all sorts of data on there as well. Things like protected areas, sites of special scientific interest. That's our sort of national nature designation for habitats and that kind of thing. So there's all that kind of data as well. And I couldn't use any of that before. But now I can just download any of these zip files and I can drag and drop them into Felt, which is dead easy. And what I've been doing is I've been starting to create a library in Felt of the data sets that I myself use most frequently. So you can see on the screen there, that's just a map of the UK. So we're in
So,
Felt.
sorry, Nick. We're actually seeing your Felt webinar notes doc. We're not seeing the
Oh,
map.
sorry.
Maybe
I
you're
picked the
not
wrong
sharing the
one.
right window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for chipping in. Go back and share again. Sorry. There we are. Is that the right one?
Yeah, that's perfect now.
Great, good. So you can see on the screen, so the ones I was showing before were just some of the data sets available, 320 plus, just in Scotland anyway, and things like special scientific interest, which I'll come back to earlier on, come back to later on. So into a felt map, just a blank map. So yeah, so what I've been doing is creating a library of my own data sets that I've downloaded. So if I go into this button at the bottom on the toolbar there, so I've created my own library called local place plans. So these are the data sets that I use quite frequently. So to choose an example, that one I just mentioned, sites of special scientific interest, is here. So I've already dragged and dropped this into Felt, so I can now access this whenever I start a new map. So if I just add that to a map, just as an example, and it pops up at the top right-hand side here. So that's the sites of special scientific interest. That's that layer now switched on. So it's as easy as that, just to add data sets. So one of the bits of work, that one of the local place plans that I've been working on recently is an area just south of Loch Ness. So that's, I'll turn that up, just hide those. So these are the Highlands, that's Loch Ness in there, which I'm sure most of you have heard of for famous reasons. And the area for the local place plan for the community is to the south of Loch Ness, just this area in here. It's about 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers south of Inverness. And in fact, let me show you the area. I'll go back to the library again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to import the community council boundaries. So these white lines are every community council area in Scotland, and the one that we're looking at is this one here, that's outlined in purple there. So that's the area which we're looking at. It's that purple area there. So I've got that library. I've already mentioned health services is a big thing for a lot of communities in the Highlands and Islands, which inevitably these services feature in local place plans as a thing to improve. So let's pick out a few data sets from my library that I downloaded from all the open data. Now I've already dragged these into this map from the library. I'm just going to get rid of that. Let me switch off the community council areas. So so I'm just going to show a few of these. So that's care homes, the green dots you can see there if you look carefully. The pharmacies, chemists, are the grey dots you can see in there. Hospitals are the kind of brown coloured dots. There's not many of those. And doctors' surgeries are the yellow dots. So you can start to see building up there for the area that we're looking at, which is this area in around here. There's not very much in terms of health services. In fact, there's only a doctor's surgery, which is there. Everything else, you have to go to Inverness, sort of 40 kilometers north, for the hospital, for pharmacies, for care homes, that kind of thing. So that's a really good bit of analysis and data for me to find that out. And before I could do that as quickly as that, I would have had to go hunting around all sorts of different maps and try and cobble together that data from all sorts of places, which would have taken me hours probably. And I can apply the same thing to things like footpaths. So this was a big issue in the local area. People wanting to improve the footpath networks to be able to walk out into the countryside. So I can, if I turn off those layers there, then I can see, oh, right, so where are the footpaths? And there's a data layer that shows where footpaths are. And there's a few around the area there already. And I can also add things like historic buildings, which are those purple dots in there. And there are hundreds of these layers you can switch on and off. So you start to be able to see connections between things, which is really valuable. So that whole analysis thing is really useful for me to see, right, people want more footpaths. Where are the existing ones? Which ones need improving? How do they link to heritage? Things that visitors might want to go and see. Where are the listed buildings? So that's all really useful. You might not find those layers interesting. So your library might look completely different. You might be more interested in electricity or water supplies or contaminated land or air quality. So you could drag and drop those things into your library and use those instead. And that's fine. If I was doing other work, I'm sure I'd be looking at different things in my library too. So all that data analysis and evidence is really valuable for me. And that's all the listed buildings across Scotland, which you can see there in dots. So the second thing that I use Felt for is to create what I call static maps. So this is a different map, which I've got here. And what I've done here is there is a data layer in this. So I mentioned sites for special scientific interest earlier on. And that area you can see I've just highlighted is one of those nature areas there. So that's a data layer that I've switched on in this map. But Anna asked if I could explain how I produced this map, because she thought that might be interesting for folk. So the story basically is we had various community engagements events. We had a giant map on the floor, you can see down there just now. People writing sticky notes on that map. We had about 6 or 8 people standing around that at one point, all thinking of what they'd like to see in the future for that village. And then before I had Felt, I then got this plan and I just wrote all the sticky notes out in typing and put them onto the map. So that was all the comments that people made, all the suggestions. Then Felt came along, and I realized I was able to start to put those onto a GIS kind of map. And that's what led to this map. So each of I'll just zoom in a bit so you can see. So there are various things on this map. And this is good enough to go into the final local place plan. So there's a title at the top, which is just a bit of text from the toolbar down here. There are captions, so fix septic tank or build new homes. And those are these notes from the bottom here. There are lines which lead across to the location of those things, and those are done through the line function there, and the dots at the end are done through the pin function on here. Obviously, you can color things in different colors as you wish. Then these speed limit signs, those are JPEGs which I dragged and dropped in, so I made those up in a different bit of software. And the title, as you can see, the categories of proposal, our homes or community life, those are all made as JPEGs and dragged and dropped in as well. And what else have we got? And you'll see, yes, these green dashed lines here are footpaths, which need to be improved. Those are really easy to make because I just use the routes function down at the bottom here and just click at either end of a path, and Felt just automatically routes along that path or that road. So if I just demonstrate, you can see here, if I can pick this function out here, that reddish orangey line is along a road. And if I drag that line across, if I drag that line across, then you'll see it moves across to that road there. So it's really easy to move things around, and you don't need to click at every point on a road. It just does it for you if you click either end. So that map was actually quite quick to create. It didn't take very long at all. You might be wondering what the big rectangle is that's around the map, and that's because the plan that this goes into isn't going to be an online plan. It has to go into a document. That's part of the legal requirement, basically. So that gray line, that black line, is the extent of the plan. So I just took a screen grab of that plan and dropped it in to the actual document. So that's what I meant by a static plan. This wasn't really designed to be zoomed in and out by by people. This was more just designed to be screen grabbed or PDF'd and then dropped into a document. So I mentioned earlier on that, in fact, we had 6 villages which we were doing in this area. So each of those has a plan. And if I zoom out, you'll start to see how there are those 6 areas there, and they each go into one big plan. So that bigger gray box is the overall plan that's going into the big document. And you can see the sites of scientific interest, the orangey areas there, and we've got a legend made with text. So all the same functions, just all created from this bottom toolbar here, have been dropped into this plan. And there's one trick, which I think Alvaro taught me actually in a seminar, which was the plan was getting a bit confusing with lots of lines on. So I didn't want to put yet another line on to show the boundary of the area that we're looking at, because it would have just been too many lines. So I thought, how can I show the area that we're looking at? And in the end, what I chose to do was I imported all the community council areas all round about, and then I grayed out all of them except the one that we're looking at. And the one that we're looking at is the bit that's a bit paler. So rather than having lots more boundaries on, I just grayed out the remaining community council areas to focus attention on the one that we're looking at. So these are all quite basic things, all quite easy to do. So that's that. And just to show you, so this is the finalized plan that we produced. That's the cover. And then I'm just going to nip through to, that's that plan on page 13. And then if I nip through to a bit later on, I'll show you where the Inverfarigig map is. So that's the Inverfarigig map. We've taken the captions off because the page formatting and the text we were using meant we had to do that on the next page instead. So it looks a bit different, but it's still done in Felt. And that's that static map that's taken from Felt and put into the overall plan. So that's how we've used the plans in the report, in the actual document itself. I'd love to present the plan online, but we're not quite there yet. So that's 2 of the ways I've used Felt. And just very quickly, the other 3 ways I was talking about. First one is I'm just starting to do public commenting on Felt for another local place plan at the other end of the Great Glen, down south of Fort William, an area called Ardgour. This is a satellite view, but it's a bit hard to read, so I'll put it back to the default view. So we've put this plan online and circulated a link to it so people can drop comments in on areas of suggestions that they have for the area, basically. So this isn't a static map. This is one which people can add comments on. And you can see if I zoom into some of the comments here, what have we got? If we click on a comment, someone said, we need a bridge across the Narrows here. Someone else has said traffic, speed and size of vehicles. Someone else has said solar electricity. So the previous way of doing this in the UK was to spend several $1,000s on a bit of software and get a company to do it for you. But now, obviously, I can now do that very quickly myself without needing to go down that cost. So that's a great bit of mapping software, which is really, really useful. And I'm only just starting to use that now. So public commenting. And then the final 2 things are collaboration, which I haven't actually done yet because of inertia, really, but I want to. So I want to start sharing maps around people I work with, so we collaborate on producing maps and producing proposals and talking about different ways of solving things. I'm sure a lot of you are doing that already, so you might have things you want to share about that. So that's my next thing I want to do. And then the final thing I use Felt for is for inspiration, of just looking at what other people are doing, because there's so much good stuff. So the Twitter feed, Felt's Twitter feed is really good. You can see things that people have produced on there. Just some are very simple and basic, some are more complicated and more professional. And then, as Anna said earlier on, there's Felt's own galleries. That's the gallery entry about what I've been talking about there. But there's a whole planning gallery, which has all sorts of interesting examples on, which you can have a look through as well. So those are the 5 ways that I use Felt. I'm very interested to hear how you guys might use Felt. I'm interested to hear suggestions of how I could use it better as well, because I'm by no means an expert. But I'll stop there and I'll hand over to Anna. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nick. This was an awesome presentation. I learned so much, and I'm always so inspired and impressed by the way you're working with different levels. It's really cool. But let's look what our audience says and just see if we can answer some questions. First of all, I see a question. Are there any restrictions to using Felt while it's under development? Maybe Alvaro can take it, actually, since it's just about the roadmap and the product. It's really cool to see people typing too. But
Yeah.
Alvaro, please take it away.
Really psyched about all the questions, and also some good questions for Nick. So actually, if anybody that posted that question just wants to unmute and speak up, I'm happy to answer with more details. Because, you know, Felt is always going to be under development in the sense that we're always building and adding new features. Is Felt ready for professional use right now? I consider that it is. I think Nick's done a great example showing that. But of course, we're adding new features. I don't know what you might mean by restrictions, but not at all. We were encouraging people just try and beat up the product and do as much as they want.
Does anyone want to come off mute? I think I would add that Felt is no longer in beta, so we have our official version that is ready. So if there are any concerns, please reach out to us. But yeah, it's totally ready to onboard your team. Okay,
sorry, it's I was on the question.
Oh, perfect.
In Vancouver, actually, we're in Canada. No, it was just then it obviously is already functional and you can do plenty of stuff. And I'll be the first to admit I haven't used it yet. Presumably at some point you'll be going to a paid model, and I'm just wondering, kind of, you know, is that 6 months, 3 years? You know, I mean, you may not know exactly, but just kind of well, the future is. And maybe my question didn't make that clear. But yeah.
Oh, we know, and we're happy to share as well. So the plan, this has been the plan from the start, is that we will start introducing paid plans at the start of 2024. So, you know, 1st of January of 2024. And of course, there's always going to be a generous free tier. So most of the stuff that Nick has shown you are things that, you know, we expect anybody to be able to do. Just go and sign up and make a Felt account. The paid plans will probably revolve, and we're still figuring out on pricing, but will revolve more around team features. So adding people from your team, having multiple editors, maybe you'll get more storage for your data or different export formats that we're still building out, those kind of things. But it's still under construction.
Okay, thank you.
We'll have more clarity at the end of summer. So we'll definitely, there will be a big, it will be a very kind of iterative rollout. So it won't be, oh, January 1st, and now there are paid plans and everything or one of a sudden is in flux. So so yeah, we'll give a preview of everything ahead of time. So I see the next question for Nick. How did you decide which data to include in your layers for local place plans analysis? The layers such as footpaths and historic buildings, where did you source that data? Also, how have communities responded to the new visualization? Nick, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so very quickly, I just Google Open Data Scotland and then the name of the data I'm looking for. So Open Data Scotland footpaths, for example, or historic buildings or listed buildings, and then see what comes up. It helps to use the kind of jargon phrase like core paths in Scotland or listed buildings. And then I look for a zip file once I've Googled, and there's usually a zip file visible somewhere there, and just download that and drag and drop it onto a felt map. So it's dead easy. And there's, yeah.
And how, if you have any feedback from local communities, how did they react to these visualizations?
Yeah, well, and I see there's also a question about how planners and government respond as well, and communities seem to like it. So when I've looked for feedback from them, then they say that it's very helpful to be able to see things on maps, basically, and the quality of what Felt can do is perfect. So people find it very useful. And in terms of submitting these plans to authorities, the two that I've submitted and heard back on so far have both been fine. Absolutely no problems with the quality of the mapping at all.
Awesome. Also, someone is sharing a tip here, which is, I really love that. So someone is saying, Nick, maybe some isochrome layers can help your visualization in order to see how far are those pharmacies. And also there are some QGIS tools for that. Nick, any response to that? Have you tried
Well, just thank you. That's really helpful. So I've taken a note. I'm going to have a look at that afterwards. Thanks. That's great.
Perfect. So the question about how does this plans are seen by officials where you need to report? Do you have any feedback already? I feel like we answered this question. Any other additional notes on like how people are perceiving it if they're like in some kind of working for some kind of official organization?
Well, I think they quite like it, not least because, well, I know from a couple of the local authorities who have seen this, that they're recommending to community groups who are doing similar plans, oh, look, here's a tool that you could use, because there isn't very much around really. So there's a big gap here, and I think there's an opportunity for people to use it much more. And the quality of what Felt produces is more than adequate.
Awesome. And as for exporting, so is there any plan to create an export function? Yes, we have export function. Alvaro and Nick, what can you say about resolution? I think since Nick has this experience, Nick, how do you deal with exports?
Well, it's probably better to ask Alvaro because I just do screen grabs.
I see.
They work fine for me, but if there's a better way that Alvaro has got in mind, it'd be good to hear.
Okay, of course.
It's actually just what Anis is showing on screen right now.
Yes, it's here. So you go here, and then you can export.
In file.
Oh, okay. Export. Yeah.
Download as image or download as PDF.
Yeah. Yes, right. How does it compare to screen grabs, Alvaro?
Right. Well, it's higher resolution than a screen grab because I mean that's like let's say special export. That what it does is it takes basically like screen grabs of the map, but just many of them and pastes them together from a higher resolution than the one you're seeing. So of course, like the definition of high resolution is variable for different people, but we found that it's pretty good, and we'd love some feedback if people are seeing that it's not enough for them or they need different sizes. We're happy to get some feedback on that.
Awesome.
Also, sorry, let me just add that there's a lot of functionality in that Felt menu in the top left corner. Many people don't seem to realize that it's a menu, but there's a lot of stuff you can do. So I'd recommend just checking it out. We've baked in some new stuff in there, and you can discover it on your own by just playing around it.
Yeah,
for example, the one that Anya is highlighting.
Yes. You can also, if you are working with some other tools, you can download all elements in GeoJSON. So that's another big highlight in this menu. It helps you to kind of integrate Felt into your workflow. Nick, do you print maps? Do you have any tips or tricks on printing maps?
I don't need to do that. I guess if I was, I would either ask Alvaro or I would just export and print.
But yeah, I think the recommendation here as well to just download this image or as a PDF and experiment with it. If you have any feedback for us, let us know. We're really interested in understanding the use case here. Okay. I see the one upvoted question here, so let's maybe go there. In Nebraska, there are some open data sources that aren't always up to date. Is there a way to create new data within the AP that Felt has published, or would I need to create a new layer with the same attributes? Thank you. Another question that Alvaro can answer.
Right. So the API right now is for doing actions that you can do inside Felt, also outside Felt. For example, you can upload a layer via the API. You can create a map via the API. You can delete a map via the API. You can do a bunch of stuff. But in this case, for example, we don't have the ability in Felt right now to combine two layers, like one from the open data portal and the other one from your own edits. So what you need to do is create a layer with the same attributes. But I would recommend here, that's a great place to go to the QGIS plugin. Since that functionality is rather simple to do in QGIS, you could do those edits in QGIS, then push them to Felt, and you'd have, let's say, the official and the newly added data all together in one single layer.
Awesome. And we also have a follow-up question for Alvaro about strategy for building the Felt database over the next year. I think it kind of relates to our questions about API.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one because we're sort of discovering it right now on the go. You may have seen that the data library has gone through some evolution over time. So when we started building it, it was more of a way of, like, let's show users all the things that you can do, because all the libraries are data uploaded to Felt and styled in Felt in the same exact way that you can do, like that any user can do, right? So that's what the original layers were like. And then we started noticing that lots of users really wanted to have these kind of base map layers that are very generic. So we started adding things like high resolution. And when I mean high resolution, you can zoom in as far as you want and it's synced with the base map. Oceans and lakes and countries and roads and buildings, which are really special for the whole world. I think those are really, really good. And that was the, let's say, phase 2. The phase 3 that we're thinking about now is like, okay, how do we enable more massive imports? We're thinking we might add like whole providers worth of data, but it's something we're currently exploring. So if you've got some ideas, we're happy to hear them out.
Awesome. Another question about download. I just wanted to repeat this to make sure that everyone saw that. But if you look at your maps that you created, you can go to File, and then you can download as image or download as PDF. This is a way to create exports. And yes, they're more high quality than screen capture. So just wanted to make sure that everyone saw that. Okay, we have a couple of other questions here. I miss how you actually download a map in Felt. Okay, so we answered that. And can we set a default view that already has comment list on?
Sure, I'll take that.
You can answer.
Okay, so the thing about the comment list is that it's visible to map editors. So you can view the comment list and see all the comments there. Right now, there isn't a way. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I was just doing that on my own.
As a creator of this map, I can see it. We just have one comment here, but if there was a bunch of anonymous comments created by people who don't have Felt accounts, I would see them all here.
Yeah, hi, this is Ryan. I was just the one who dropped that comment, and I was looking at Nick's interaction map, and I guess my goal in that comment was, how do we make it as simple as possible for somebody to come in and know, like, it's really just, all I have to do is open this map and click where I want to click. I don't have to, he had a couple of instructions, and I'm always trying to eliminate those instructions when I'm doing things like that. So I was just curious if there was a way to kind of set that up for commenting directly, so that there was a link that was like, all you have to do is open this link and click.
That's actually a really cool thought. So maybe like a special kind of link is what I'm understanding, like comment mode. So it's enabled, like you just click and it adds a comment directly, right? Instead of having to add the click on the
Exactly. I would say, even being able to limit tools down or whatever else, like there's a lot of need out there for like commenting on geographic or visual kinds of content, and it's generally the tools out there are overly complex. Like you have to go through several steps to figure out what you're doing or log in or whatever. And the thing that I really am liking about this, the little example that Nick was giving, and I was like, oh, great. Without those instructions, this would be perfect.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, actually, have you tried this on mobile? Because the experience is a bit different and it may be a bit closer to what you're looking for, but it's some excellent feedback for us on desktop as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't done the mobile for a little bit since you first announced it. I kind of went poking, but I didn't. I haven't gone back in.
Yeah, Ryan, I would I think the best we're really curious about your feedback, but I think the best kind of workaround for now is when you share it, right? You can share it only view and comment. So if people don't need felt accounts, they only can view and comment, and then you ask them to leave comments on mobile, because if they open a link like that on mobile, the only actions they can do on the map, they can't place any elements, they can't do anything except for adding a comment. So that would be probably the cleanest way to do that for now. But super excited to see if you have any feedback or how it can work for your use case. Okay. Are there any other questions from this group? If you just want to raise a hand or unmute. Alvar is raising a hand.
I think there's one more, Anya.
Oh,
yeah, there's one we missed there in the middle that says, well, I'm finally getting the hang of making green nodes. What are the best data sites to start with on Felt for community planning? My suggestion would be look for your city's open data portal. Most cities publish and have pretty well kept open data portals. And as Nick was saying, at least what I do is, whenever I find a city's open data portal, the first thing I do is filter by some geospatial format. I filter by shapefile, I filter by GeoJSON, I filter by geopackage, even by CSV, which many times contains latitudes and longitudes, something that I can drag and drop into my felt map. So for example, I've been experimenting with this recently. Just you type in City of Toronto open data, you get an excellent portal.
I see. Thank you so much, Alvaro, for this answer. Ryan, I see your raised hand.
Thanks. I'm just curious about your kind of toolbox and if there are other tools kind of in the works. I really like the simplicity of cut, marker, route, and pin, but I'm just curious if there's any other kind of magic tricks you have up your sleeves.
Yeah, so I mean, the toolbar is really good for creating data and annotating data, right? So you can. But of course, the amount of data that you can create just by clicking on a map is kind of finite. I mean, if you want, polygons for the states of the US, those are pretty complex, so you're importing that for somewhere else. So let's say that the toolbar is dedicated to those kind of things that live at the top level of the map. We call those workspace elements, things that just really stand out or really easy to create. But then there's the whole world of data importing, which is mainly accessible through the upload anything tool, which is the cloud with the arrow on the right on the toolbar. And there's actually a lot more magic in there than you'd expect. So everything that you can upload there, you can just drag it in directly into Felt. We recently added capabilities to import from URLs. So in the Felt menu, as Anya was showing, you can now go to File, Add from URL, and bring in a bunch of data without even having to download to your computer. So yeah, there is a lot of magic, and we're still trying to strike the balance of keeping it simple and keeping it powerful. So as always, any feedback is super welcome.
Yeah, and also just to make sure it's a more niche use case, but you can bring both vector and raster data. So if you have any raster data or satellite imagery, it can also be brought into Felt and annotated. Okay, Fionn, I see your raised hand. Do you want to go next?
Yeah, hi. I'm really excited about this tool. I did try to use GIS as a academic and failed miserably. So it's nice to see something that is hopefully a bit simpler. My question to you all really is, we're as a community, we're trying to activate on a very local level. And a lot of the discussion here is about making maps. And I'm just trying to think of Felt as a kind of live community tool, you know, something that's inside a hall on a screen and is kind of working in real time. And I just wondered if anybody had ever used it like that. So in other words, rather than using it as a sort of archival tool, you know, you actually put the map up dynamically and create it collaboratively as an event, as a community event.
I can see a way of doing that, particularly on smaller sites, Fionn. So where you're looking at, you know, say you're looking at a particular neighborhood and streets and houses, and you've got a bit of land you're looking at, that sort of scale. I can see it working very well at that scale. Might be a bit trickier to do it at a, you know, across a whole region, just because of the scale of the geography. But yes, I can see a way of doing that, as long as the person who's operating it is quick enough on the ball to locate things and type simple captions.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, maybe we'll give that a try. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Fionn. I also see a couple of questions, additional questions here. Shamel asks, is there a current or planned capacity to view different versions or have version control across different groups? Oliver, do you want to answer this?
Sure. So while we don't have, let's say, fully fledged versioning right now, that's definitely on the roadmap. So planned, yes. And as for current, there are a few tricks that you can do to keep different versions of maps. For example, one tool that we use a lot internally is duplicating a map. So that's something that you can probably also show on you. If you just click on the Felt menu on the top left, there you have an option, duplicate map. And that's really useful to like keep different versions of the same thing. We've seen these used by, for example, teachers in the classroom, say like, here's a template, and then everybody can duplicate it and make their own version. But we've also seen it for people like doing different scenarios. So I'm aware that's not full versioning right now, but yes, it is on the planning.
Awesome. And someone in the chat is also asking how to select a specific area of a map and download it as an image. I just wanted to reiterate that our image and PDF download works on different zoom levels, so you can zoom in and zoom out, and you will be able to download what you see. So it's already there if you would like to use it. Any more questions from this group? You can just raise hand or unmute yourself, not necessarily post on the map. Well, I would like to, okay, in that case, I will probably take this one last opportunity. I'm just curious to ask Nick to just understand his mapping workflow before he started using Felt. I'm always really curious how it compares to a regular workflow, how it worked with the GIS. You know, did he work with an outside GIS consultant, or how was it organized, and how it really compares to using Felt?
Well, my workflow before was that I had a colleague who I worked with who was based somewhere else, who had GIS, who's no longer around. So the two of us worked together, and that was good. Obviously, that was very collaborative. But if we were now doing that, we would both be on Felt, and we would both be working collaboratively in the same way that we're all looking at this map on the screen, and we would be drawing on that. I couldn't have done that before because I didn't have a GIS license. So it was really slow before I would just scribble things down and send them off to him. So it's infinitely better, much better.
Okay, well, this is really cool. Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you everyone who contributed their questions and thoughts and feedback. We're always really grateful for your feature requests and just your stories about using Felt. You can always reach out to us at support@felt.com, or you can also join our Felt community on Reddit, where a lot of people are asking questions and sharing maps that they like, or giving feedback to each other about the maps that they're creating. We're really trying to connect map makers and make sure that we're building a tool that is useful for planners and for other types of map makers. So thank you, Nick. Thank you, Alvaro. And we'll be back with more webinars and more events. Stay tuned. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nick.